I actually have with me here, I don't know if you can see it, this icon of Maximilian Kolbe. And for anybody working in prison ministry, of course, he's one of our great saints and inspirations. And I'll let Gerald talk about him if he wishes to mention the namesake of his ministry. But first, I'm thinking all of us have been somewhat rattled by the events of the past couple of days. So I just would invite us all just to take about a minute and just center ourselves. And let's take this moment to also offer our quiet prayers for our country. So again, welcome everybody. And as part of our conversation today, we have about 60 people signed up. I think for now, if people would like to ask questions directly, you can. Otherwise, you can also send your questions or comments via the chat line, which we'll be monitoring. And that way, Gerald can respond to those questions or comments as well. So Gerald, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Father. I appreciate that. And, I welcome everybody. I know there's a lot of people from across the country that have joined us today. And I'm just excited about this. My wife actually told me before we got on here, she's like, you have just an hour to talk about prison ministry? And I was like, yeah, just an hour. So anyways, I'm very happy to do this. It's something that I have a tremendous passion for. And I have gotten some lifelong friends from being involved in this prison ministry. And we actually had a dinner last night outside of San Antonio, and we were fortunate to have some of the most wonderful people that are involved in this ministry that I have ever known in my life. And they humble me because of the goodness of these people that are involved in prison ministry. So I know I'm speaking to a lot of you out there now. But anyways, I will just start out, and I'm going to try to keep the topic on the prison, the retreats that we do behind bars. And so with that, I'll go ahead and give an introduction to how we actually started and how these things came about. So back in 2009 was when we actually started doing retreats in the prisons. And the reason for it has been just to be there to help them heal and grow in their faith. And I would be derelict if I didn't mention Acts missions. And I don't know, there may be a lot of you that are familiar with Acts missions. It's grown. There's over 1 million people that have been on these retreats. And Acts missions is really what got us started. It's a beautiful thing. If you haven't heard of it, I would strongly encourage you to go out and find out and learn more about Acts missions. You can Google them. That's the name of their website is Acts missions, and go find them. The ACTS and Acts mission stands for adoration, community, theology, and service. And these are our Catholic retreats that are lay people retreats that are put on to help grow the dynamics inside of a parish. And just to make a long story short, what we did was we actually, we had one of our founding members, Larry Ray. Larry Ray was doing some Kairos retreats and working inside some of the prisons. One specifically was a Connolly unit in Texas. And there was an ex-offender, there was an offender there that actually was on the retreat, the Kairos retreat, that had been on an Acts retreat in the outside world. And anyways, he could see the value of bringing an Acts retreat into the prisons. And so he talked to Larry Ray about this. And so Larry thought too it was a great idea to do that. And so that's where all of this began. So initially, we called the retreats that we do prison acts. And that's how it started. So we brought these Acts retreats in, and we'd serve about 60 men inside the prison on each retreat. And then later on, after some changes that needed to be made, and we needed to be recognized as our own nonprofit organization, we changed the name from Prison Acts to Kolbe Prison Ministries. And these retreats, we've just had thousands of men that actually, men and women, that have actually participated in these retreats across the state of Texas, and now even into Louisiana, where we've been doing retreats for a couple of years. What we do in these retreats is we introduce them into a love, really. That's what, in my opinion, that's what they're about, is they're about love and the love of God and what he has for all of us. And so we are able, through these 3 days that we spend with these retreatants, we are able to share our agape love with them. And in this, we share the beauty of our faith. And so then they begin to learn and understand. We had a question earlier about whether the retreats were open to all denominations or only Catholic. And they are open to everybody. We don't want to make any mistake. The retreats are Catholic. They're 100% Catholic. We're extremely proud of that fact that they're Catholic. But we invite everybody, because a lot of people have a lot of misunderstandings about our faith. And so we like that if we can clear those things up and have them participate. So there's what I was talking about. We changed it from the mission impossible to mission possible. And it is a mission of Kolbe Prison Ministry to share that agape love of Christ with the offenders, and to teach them the fullness and the truth of our Catholic Church. And it's such a beautiful thing to share that we're just very, very happy to do that. So throughout the presentation, I have pictures from some of the retreats, and I think they kind of help to give us a feeling of what's really going on in the retreats. So it's like this picture. This is one of the table groups of some women. The people in the red are from the outs. We refer to them as an outside team and an inside group. So that's how we differentiate between the people. So you can see a lot of smiles here. So it's a beautiful thing. So most of the retreats that we do, they take place in a gymnasium typically. And most of these prisons that we are in, we have somewhere upwards of 100 participants in each of the retreats. And that includes the people from the inside and the outside. The retreats typically run from Thursday morning, and we usually start early, like at 6 a.m. We go into the prisons, and then we actually then go through Saturday evening. And a lot of people wonder why we don't do a full weekend. And the reason for that is that most of these prisons are located in rural communities. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult for us to get priests in these small towns, these communities, that could actually come in and celebrate Mass on a Sunday. So that's why we actually move it. We initially started out doing them starting Thursday evening and then ending them Saturday at around noon. I'm sorry, Sunday at around noon, but we've switched that now to Thursday morning and ending on Saturday evening. And it just helped us with the logistics of getting the retreats done. So we usually also have a commissioning of the team and with Mass prior to the retreats. And so these are just a few of the little things I'm going to mention that we do on all of these things. So this is another example of just some of the guys that are on retreat, and the people in red, usually in the colored shirts, are usually the table leaders that are with them. So the way that we actually set these things up is that when a prison is in need of having a retreat, or we're actually scheduling multiple retreats, the core team from Kolbe will select a director, and we have prayers, and we actually do this in a very prayerful way when we choose a director, and then we kind of draw them out and let that be something divine for all of us, that we select the director, and then they in turn select co-directors. And I could briefly tell you that on the core groups, what our main goal with the core groups is that we would have a core group of men or women, or men and or women, that actually are with each diocese. So for example, like for the Diocese of Austin, there's a core team that works out of Austin, and they actually work within those retreats and everything in Austin. And we, as a Kolbe Prison Ministry Board, or our missions group, we actually oversee all of that. So there's kind of a little hierarchy that we've created. Some of the dioceses are so large, like the Galveston-Houston Diocese is extremely large and has lots of prisons within it. There's actually 3 different core teams that actually work out of the Galveston-Houston group. So they actually pick their own directors and everything once they've done the initial retreats. There's a few things that we like to see on a retreat, is that once the retreats have been, they set up a team and they've established themselves, we like to see new members. So that's new outside team members. And that helps us to grow the number of volunteers that are actually working in the retreats and in the prisons. So typically the number of people we're looking to facilitate or put on a retreat is somewhere around 20 to 30. And we've done that with a whole lot less than that, obviously, but that's the optimal, is if we could have 20 people, 25 people on an outside team, that's a perfect number to put on a retreat. So you can kind of see, this is you can see with the group here, this is a group of men that were on a retreat, and this is the outside team. So that's just an example of what that is. So to talk a little bit about the preparation for retreat, typically we have up to 5 meetings. That's a lot, actually, because we do so many of these retreats that 5 meetings is a lot. But depending upon how many retreats and the experience of the team, these people then could actually have 1 meeting, no meetings, 3 meetings, or whatever. It's really about engaging the team and building the spiritual side of the team before we go into doing a retreat. Because all of these things, we're going into the devil's workshop when we go into a prison, and there's a lot of evil that goes on there. So we know we're faced with that, and it's crazy the things that happen prior to us going and doing a retreat. But anyways, the director is the guy that actually determines how many meetings we should have before going into the prison. As in most retreats, there's a lot of details in what happens. And there's some of the things that we actually hold in confidence, things that go on in the retreat that we're not going to talk about today. And I hope everybody can respect that. But there are some things that we will do on every retreat. We will celebrate the Mass multiple times. We will set up adoration of the Blessed Sacrament at the retreat. We will pray the Rosary and the Divine Mercy Chaplet. We will have share testimonials of conversion. That's if it's a brand new retreat, it'll be all of the outside team members that actually share that. And then once we've done that, then we also have an inside team. And that inside team will then begin to share their conversion testimony. We share our love of God with the retreatants. That's an absolute. We do that on every retreat. I said this earlier, but the retreats are 100% Catholic. In every respect of the retreat, they are 100% Catholic. We invite everybody to come on the retreats, and we will take the time to try to educate and give them the information they need about our Catholic faith. But these retreats are Catholic. And there's a reason for that, is that there are other retreats like Kairos that are non-denominational that everybody can go to, and they're good. There's nothing wrong with them, but these people have nothing else that's Catholic. And so that's why we started to do these retreats. And finally, we pray and we sing together and just celebrate the joy of the Lord. And we share that with them openly. So that's the, just another picture, one of the priests and an offender. I'd like to just take a moment here. Why don't we, if anybody has any questions about the things that I've discussed so far, we could jump into that and I'll answer your questions.
And so, yeah, feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you have a question or a comment.
This is Terry Tuttle from the Springfield Diocese. Testimonies of conversion. Aren't most of your outside team lifelong or cradle Catholics? What kind of statement do they make as their testimony of conversion?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Terry. The thing that we all live as Catholics is we all have a life, but there's a time when I think we really and truly become fully Catholic. We really take our, if I took myself, for example, let me do that. I grew up and went to a Catholic school. I grew up in a very good Catholic family. Everything about us was Catholic. But there was a time when I decided I was going to do more than just go to church on Sunday and go to confession a few times a year. It was a time when I said, I've got to really get involved. I've got to evangelize. I've got to go to these places that most people don't want to go. And so that's my conversion. That was really the time when I really and truly became, maybe it's a servant of the Lord, if you want to use that term or something like that. But there was a conversion that went on for me. And it was actually, for me personally, it was in one of these Acts retreats that I referred to. So I think we all, at some point when we decided to get into prison ministry, we've had some kind of a conversion of heart. And I hope that answers your question.
Hey, Jim, can I jump in for a minute?
Absolutely.
I'm Deacon Bob from the Archdiocese of San Antonio. I work very closely with Gerald. A lot of guys that are on our outside team have a previous background of being incarcerated, and their stories can really touch the hearts of these men.
Gerald, Mike McGarry with Malta. How do you deal with the wardens to get in?
Well, so that's always a challenge, okay? But the way we usually work into these is through the chaplains. So one of the good things that we've done so far is that we're currently working in over 60 prisons in the state of Texas and in Louisiana. And so that gives us some credibility as to what we're doing and a lot of references. So there's a lot of wardens and a lot of people that they can contact to see about these prisons, or see about the retreats that we're doing. So that's one of the things that we've done is we give them an outline. We tell them what we're about. Most of the wardens and chaplains are familiar with the things like Kairos retreats, and we can actually demonstrate some similarity to a Kairos retreat, but we can also talk about the population of being Catholic and about how important it is to have a Catholic retreat. And that's really where we get the invitation to come in, is by demonstrating past performance, if I can, and how they've actually worked in the past. But it's a chaplain warden communication thing. And then usually what we've been required to do when we are doing an initial retreat in a prison is that we will actually go and meet with the warden and the chaplain and describe and answer their questions in person.
Do you have to do anything special for those guys that have prior incarceration? I know in Illinois, it's real hard for them to get approval to be volunteers.
That's another great question. There is something usually here in the state of Texas. It takes them at least 18 months to 24 months of being in the outside world before they're even considered to let them come back into a prison. And usually, especially into the prison that they were incarcerated in before. And that has to go to the warden. So the warden has to approve that. These people are also required to go through the Texas Department of Criminal Justice training, volunteer training program. And so that helps them to get qualified. But at the end of the day, all of these people that have been incarcerated previously have to be approved by that warden at that particular unit.
So Gerald, we have a question from Clarence, and he wants to know if retreats are going on during the COVID pandemic, and how has the pandemic affected the frequency of the retreats? And normally, how many retreats are held each year?
Hey, Gerald, you want to say a little more about the inside team?
Yeah, I will. Let me answer this question first, Bob. The COVID has really shut everything down. I mean, we actually, there's a lot of the prisons that we know they haven't even been able to get any of the sacraments at all since the COVID began. And so for us, it's been kind of a travesty. It stopped everything for us, except for letter writing and that kind of communication. Recently, we've been able to go in and actually provide some of the sacraments, that we can, as we have the deacons or the priests or the people that are approved to go in and do that. But for all intent and purposes, since COVID, we've been totally locked out of the prisons for doing retreats. Mm-hmm. Deacon Bob mentioned something about the inside team. When we establish and we do a retreat, the first retreat, all of the activities, all of the support for the retreat is done by the outside team. And that's where these 25 men or women actually earn their pay, which is nothing, but they earn their pay. After that first retreat, then we have people from the inside actually participate and become members of the inside team. So we will have an equal number of people from the inside as we do on the outside, and they will actually help us facilitate everything with the retreat. We even go so far as to having an inside director, and he actually helps to lead. And it's a wonderfully beautiful cooperation that comes between the inside and the outside teams that help. And typically, these people that help put on these retreats on the inside, they most of the time become the Catholic leaders inside these prisons and what we're working on and what we do in them. There's a couple of other things I probably should mention about the way Kolbe Prison Ministry works. We are not just about doing retreats. The retreats it's kind of like lighting the fire. But unless we actually go back and we do other things like Bible studies and RCIA classes and bring them, make sure that they get the sacraments and follow it, the retreats are really worth nothing. So the beauty of it is that all of these retreats actually lead to RCIA classes and Bible studies and lots of other communication that we do. some of the prisons here in Texas, we have during a normal year, let me qualify that, not in this COVID year. In a normal year, we have as many as 3 different times when we are actually in those prisons every week. And so some of it is doing RCIA classes, some of it is actually doing Bible studies, and then some of the classes are actually getting catechesis training so that we actually have approved catechists inside the prisons. These things ultimately lead to the sacraments, where I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but we've had hundreds of men that have been baptized and confirmed inside the prisons as a result of being on a Kolbe retreat and then going through the RCIA training classes. So it's kind of a beautiful thing in how it develops and works through their lives.
Gerald, can you walk us through the retreat, what you do at the first day and how it progresses? And maybe, because most of us are probably familiar with Kairos or Cursillos, but how is yours?
Well, and that's the part of it, we won't share everything like I told you. We want to keep some secrets from everybody until you actually do a retreat. But typically when we come in, we actually just come in like we do and meet everybody. We have some icebreaker activities that we go through with the people that come in. We then all of the introductions of all of the people from inside and the outside are all introduced, and then we begin to do activities that bring us to the roots of our Catholic faith. And some of the times it begins with a mass, and sometimes it is an explanation of that mass. We also have testimonies from the very beginning, and the testimonies are done so that people begin to engage. After each testimony, there's time, 30, 45 to 45 minutes, where then the tables will actually share at their table unit about the talk and the testimony and maybe what impact it has on them and what they might do. Then each of these tables has an opportunity to come up, and they get a spokesman from each table, and they then relate what their table talked about. And so it's in this sharing and in this testimony that people begin to grow and what they're doing and the relationships with the people in that retreat. It's really common when people come in the first day, they keep us way at arm's length. They're just really suspicious of why these people would be coming in here and doing this. And, it's real foreign to them. They don't want to be close to us and all of those kind of things. They kind of shy away. By the end of the third day, they're hugging us and everything changes in those relationships. There are some things that are probably important that I mentioned is that we also provide all of the meals. So there's another big undertaking that we provide lunch and dinner for all of the retreatants and all of the team members while we're there. We don't do breakfast because usually they get breakfast before we arrive in the mornings, but the teams actually supply the meals. We do, here's an example, you see the picture here of some of the serving and how we actually do some of these things in the prisons. But we supply the meals. There's usually a part of the outside team that participates with that and the inside team that helps to prepare or put these together. There's not a lot of big cooking, but it's a lot of warming over or doing that. And in some of the prisons, we've actually gone to the Knights of Columbus and the women's guilds and some of these other parts of our Catholic churches or parishes, and they actually then provide us with the meals, and they'll deliver barbecue sandwiches, or they'll deliver something that we would have for a meal. Um, there's also cases where we get local restaurants that actually will supply us with a spaghetti dinner or something like that, or 80 pizzas or something like that we can bring into the prisons. So we take all of those things and actually bring them together, because there's 5 meals that we provide while we're there, and it's a pretty big undertaking just to do the meals.
Gerald, this is Mike again. Can I just interrupt for a second?
Absolutely.
My experience in the New Hampshire State Prison is we can't even bring in cookies. Have you run up against any opposition of bringing in food? We can't bring in any food.
Well, a part of it, I mean, so y'all don't have, there's no Kairos retreats there.
Yes, there is. This is a
So
Kairos
they don't
retreat.
bring cookies into a Kairos retreat?
We cannot.
Okay, well, so then, we, in some of the jail retreats that we've done, they are fed chow from the jail.
That's what
And
happened.
so that's what would happen. I mean, that would be my guess, and that would be the only solution that I know of, is that they would have to allow time for them to either to go to the chow hall, or whether eat their lunch and then come back, or whatever arrangement could be made with that.
But
you
you haven't experienced the pushback from the wardens.
No, not in the prisons, but we have in the jail. So in some of the jails that we go to, we have not been allowed to bring in the food. But so then they actually, in the situations I'm talking about, they actually brought the meals into the retreat location.
Right, that's what
and
happened.
served them the trays. And so, there's workarounds. We can't change the whole prison system, but we just find a way to make it work. And that, anyways.
Great, thank
So
you.
that's all I know we could do in that case.
Yeah.
Gerald, I have a question for you, and it has to do in a way with, suppose somebody lives in California or Maine, how could they engage with Kolbe Prison Ministries? Is this proprietary, or do you have like a format that you're willing to share so people could replicate it somewhere else?
Yeah, yes, great question. Because at the very end of this, I have a little bit of a slide that actually shows how this would happen. And we would plan to work this very much like we mirror Acts missions and what they do in a lot of cases. And so let me give you an example if I could. There was a time when in San Francisco, they wanted to have an Acts retreat in San Francisco. So me and 9 other guys flew to San Francisco, and we met with some local guys there that then we held a retreat for those people. And so we taught those 15 people that attended the retreat about the retreat. Then the next time there was a retreat there was 25 of us that actually put on the retreat for a whole lot more people. And so that would be ideal, is that if we could actually put together a group of people from one of the core teams, whether it's in Louisiana or Dallas or Houston, and we put together a group of people that actually then would travel and actually help to put on a retreat in a facility. And that's what we would recommend doing, is that we help put on the first one, and then we send a few people, not as many, on the second one. And after the second one, we would turn it over to a core team in that city or that diocese. Hopefully that answered your question.
Gerald, what would be great now is if we were going to help another diocese somewhere else in the U.S. put on a retreat, we could have a series of team meetings, virtual, and then show up there to help them with the retreats.
Well, that's exactly what we did even before, when we were doing Acts retreats years and years ago. I've done them Acts retreats from Tennessee to California and lots of states in between. And on those retreats, we always met virtually and prior to actually doing the retreat. So these things open up a lot of opportunities for us.
I noticed that C. Thompson had a question, but I don't quite understand it. So if you're there, could you come on and sort of address your question to us and explain what you're asking? It has to do with preparation meetings in person. And while we're waiting for you, Jim Backus in Alabama raises a point that I think most of us who are involved in prison ministry have experienced. And he says in Alabama, Catholics are a very small percentage of the population. Furthermore, there's a lot of anti-Catholic rhetoric among evangelical groups. So do you find a lot of static or anti-Catholic resistance from inmates that form an obstacle to encountering Christ in your retreats?
Absolutely. You know, the first, especially during the first retreats that we do in any of the prisons, you know, it's kind of like, I think they load them up, or I think even the chaplains try to put a lot of these people into our retreats. And the beautiful part of it is that they typically flip. It's usually the ones that are the most anti-Catholic. If we can ever get them to just pause and listen, then they actually begin to come and change. And, you know, it's their opposition and their interest in opposing us that I think actually creates their desire to learn more and their curiosity. And so, you know, we just take it all kinds, and it doesn't matter to us if the retreat has 70 people in it or if it has 20 people in it. It doesn't make any difference. Some of the first retreats that we did were very small groups of people that were actually Catholic, you know, and so we just look at it as our job is to evangelize and to bring the truth. And I think once we begin to do that, then all of these hearts begin to change and soften.
You know, one of the things I learned over the years is basically the ignorance of people out there that's often reinforced deliberately by some of the non-Catholic chaplains around the language we use, because a lot of prisoners are not aware that Catholics are Christians. In fact, you'll hear people say, well, I'm a Christian, but my girlfriend's Catholic, as if they were separate. And I think one of the things we need to be mindful of in our language is reappropriating our language as, you know, we are Christians, because it's very confusing for people who don't have any theological background or they weren't raised in a church. They hear Catholic, they hear Christian, they're separate things for a lot of them.
Absolutely. You know, and I think the question also leads back to, you know, we really do require that these retreats are followed up with classes for RCIA. I have never been involved in any retreat anywhere where Protestant people didn't come forward and say, how can I become a Catholic? And if we don't give them those classes, then we're not fulfilling our real role in being there. And so to me, that's the beauty of it, whether it's in Alabama or where we face some of that same, I don't even know. I think there's one Catholic chaplain in all of the state of Texas in over 100 prisons.
Yeah. So what do you do in prisons where there's a potentially hostile chaplain? How do you go in and do RCIA in that?
I think most of them are hostile to us. Yeah. But anyways, you know, it's actually, we have to put them against each other. So whatever they allow Kairos to do, then we say, well, then we need to do the same thing. If you're having a Bible study for this Protestant group or this Muslim group or this group, then we say, well, we need our time. Where's our time slot in all of this? And really, that's what it is. You have to just work the system the way that you can and find your way in. And it's not always easy. And we get lots of rejection, but we never give up. You know, that's the thing. It's like we've been here a long time and we will be here a long time in the future.
How large is your organization?
Well, you know, if I looked at just volunteers, you know, for our day, we're currently working in over 60 prisons across the state of Texas and into Louisiana. in our database that we have for Kolbe Prison Ministry, we have 2,200 volunteers. And this is a count of people that have actually just volunteered in some way, shape, or form and done work inside the prisons. So if I were to take just one of the prisons that I go to frequently, there's probably a core group of 10 people that go to that prison a lot. And then there's, when we do retreats, and somebody had asked this earlier and I didn't answer it. When we do retreats, we typically do 2 retreats per year in these prisons. And the reason we do those 2 is because that's what Kairos does. So it's part of it is, if Kairos does a retreat, then we want to do a retreat. And if Kairos does 4 retreats, then we want to do 4 retreats. And so that's part of the motivation, is that we want to be treated equally as they treat any of the other organizations.
Well, speaking of equality, one of the things that I most disliked about Kairos International was that they did not allow women to participate in the Kairos retreats in the men's prisons because they had had some bad experiences in the past, which is understandable, but it was just this blanket rule. Do you have any, obviously I see women in your picture here, so are women fully participating in the Kolbe retreats?
Well, no, we don't. And I say that with a caveat. As you can see in this picture, there are women that actually come and serve meals, and they provide some of the meals and the services from the outside, and they will actually come in and serve a lunch or a dinner or something for the retreat. And honestly, the reason we did this was because through the women, we get more men involved in the retreats. It's kind of one of those things that when the women have the softer hearts, and so they give in and they want to help and serve, and then they get their husbands involved. And that's what happened in this particular case in this picture. But for the real guts and the real dimensions within the dimensions of the retreat, it's a men's only thing. And the women are the same way. It's a women's only retreat when we're doing women's retreats. There's things that we'll share in a audience that's all men, and we'll open up if it's all men. And there's things that the dynamics of a man and women group inhibit things, and then they also bring out other things that they're not conducive to the spiritual growth that we're looking for. And we really like to have something that's really kind of closed and very private. That's what we try to achieve, is something that's private and intimate within that group of 100 and 120 people.
Okay. Somebody's asking, Jim is asking, how do you deal with exclusion from communion so that obstacles are not created? Do you ask inmates about whether they're Catholic before they come? I assume.
One of the things we do, and we have the priest, this is a lay ministry, okay? So I could get that straight. It's a lay ministry, but we do have priests, thank the Lord, that actually come in and help and facilitate with us. And when they come in, we tell them that they need to, during Mass, they need to tell people the differences and tell them who can come and who cannot receive the Eucharist. And so we talk about, coming forward. Everybody's welcome to come forward for a blessing. But if you're not a Catholic, and if you haven't, been to confession, and they go through all of the good Catholic things that we should be telling them. We don't verify. There's no way we verify or kind of try to check everybody to see if they're Catholic. That's not possible in the church I go to here in San Antonio. But anyways, we explain it, and the men that we encounter, I think they all respect this. And I think if I was going to guess, I'd say we have very few people that violate that rule of our church.
How about reconciliation? How do you handle that?
It's the same way. We tell them what it is. We tell them if you're a Catholic, what it is. And if you're not a Catholic, we tell them what. And we also invite them, though, and most of the priests that we have are, they're willing to actually talk to these people if they're not a Catholic, even though they're not going to give them forgiveness for their sins. We feel like it's very encouraging if they just go and visit with the priest and talk about things they've done in their life. And it's one of those things that honestly is a big conversion time. When these people can experience that confidentiality that they might have with this priest, it actually helps to change a lot of people's hearts about what we do in the Catholic Church. And so it's to me, it's a beautiful thing. There's a lot of times when we have a large Catholic population in a prison that we might have a deacon or somebody else that's there where they actually then could go and just listen or talk to the people that are not Catholic.
And somebody wants to know about RCIA. Do you have a specific program that you use?
Currently, what we're doing, we had some wonderful people that were catechists and everything else, and they got together with one of the prisons here in Texas and the Catholic community inside that prison. And so they specifically put together RCIA for prisoners. And so it was done by the prisoners' input, and everything else was put into it. Currently, what we're doing is we're actually looking into the Knights of Columbus programs that we could actually do via mail, so that we could actually send them and do correspondence RCIA classes. The Knights of Columbus has some very good materials that we're looking at using that might be a little bit easier to facilitate during these times when we're shut out of the prisons. But we don't want to stop the education process, so we're trying to keep that going.
What do you do for Spanish speakers?
Well, it's the same thing. We actually, in some of the prisons that have a very large Hispanic population, we actually have RCIA teachers that are Spanish, and they have been translating all of these courses into Spanish. It's funny you mentioned that, Father, with the picture that's up here. That's exactly what they're doing. The person on the left is speaking in Spanish, and the person on the right is interpreting. And during the retreats, what we do is we actually have somebody that translates 100% of the discussions and talks and everything else from English to Spanish. And we give them headsets. You can see the man on the left has a wire going into his pocket for his headset. So everything that he's hearing is in Spanish.
Gerald, this is Jerry Muehlberger.
Hey, Jerry.
Hey, how you doing? I'm on the Kolbe Prison Ministries San Antonio group here and on the missions group. And I just wanted to comment about the RCIA program. As Gerald said, we have an RCIA program that was developed in the prison with prisoners. Started off about 8 years ago. We're in our, umpteenth revision now. And as a matter of fact, I'm about to put out the latest revision onto our website. It's available free on the website. We've gotten permissions from certain groups to utilize some of their material that we use in the RCIA program. It's focused not only on bringing people into the Catholic faith like the typical RCIA program is, that's its primary focus, but also we have in the typical RCIA classes that we provide in many of the prisons, we have up to 50% or more that are non-Catholic that come specifically because they're just interested in what we crazy Catholics are doing. So we have made the program specifically for that expanded group. In other words, it's about the Catholic faith, but it provides opportunities for digging into those areas that are particularly difficult for some non-Catholic participants. And again, that's available free on our website, kolbeprisonministries.org. And the latest version will be out there in, I'd say within the week or so. And it's both in English and in Spanish. There's a part 1, which is typical RCIA, and there's a part 2, which is called Our Father's Plan, which is a a Bible study with Jeff Cabbins and Scott Hahn. So those are all available, as I said, free for downloading on the website.
So Jerry, would you type in that website connection on the chat for people?
Yes.
Thank you. Clarence wants to know who recruits prisoners to come to the retreats, and how do you do that?
Well, for the first retreat, where it's left up totally to the chaplain. And usually the chaplain will just put together a list of people. We try to ask them to give preference to Catholics that are in the prison. But then ultimately that first one is done by the chaplain by himself. After that, we have some input, and there are some people that we ask to be on the retreats. We ask them to give preference to the people that are in RCIA classes and the people that have a desire to learn about the Catholic faith. And so that's how it comes about. A lot of times then we also, where we've done retreats many times, the inside team actually will put together a list of people. And but at the end of the day, the chaplain has the final say.
Hey, can I ask a question? I'm April. I'm actually a chaplain here at our facility. How do, love all of this, by the way, wish this was available here. How do you grow that inside team? I actually am a lay Catholic woman in this position, but I'm also one chaplain for almost 400. So my time is, I can't meet all the needs.
Well, I guess it all begins with the RCIA classes. And it's, for each of the RCIA classes, we have people that actually are Catholic inside the prison, and they help to facilitate that. And once they actually get involved in the classes and they see the eagerness of some of the people to learn, they begin to recruit. And that's what I've just observed happening in the prisons that I've worked in, is that they help bring the other people in because they want their community to grow. And that's the part of the beauty of all of this, is that, Deacon Bob Leibrecht is on this conference. And 8 years ago, he and I went to a prison here in Texas for the first time. They hadn't had a Catholic service there, and I think it was 7 years prior to us coming that Saturday. When we showed up on that Saturday, we had 3 people that came to our Catholic service. Well, if we were going just before COVID hit, we were having as many as 120 or 130 people that would come to our services. And so that's the difference. And it takes time, but they want it to grow as well.
You want to mention the reunion, Gerald, and the importance of that?
Yeah, it's a part of what we also do is when, it's not in all of the prisons are we doing this, but in some of the prisons, the community, the outside community has taken it upon themselves to start doing what we call Kolbe reunions. And so once a month, we go back and we bring special treats, whether it's cakes or donuts or something. And we go in for about 4 hours, and we invite everybody that's been on a Kolbe retreat to come to the reunion. And it's one of those things we do to keep everybody connected. And it's a prayerful thing. We usually have mass or a communion service. And sometimes we show a video, some kind of a little movie or something that is faith oriented, and have discussions about that and so forth. And it's just another thing that we're doing to help keep the community connected. So yeah, all of these things, you can see in the pictures, they result in baptisms and confirmation. That's the beauty of all of these things is that, we've seen lots, I don't know how many hundreds of people we've seen converted. And on the other side, I don't know if there's anybody out there that's participating in the conference here that has been incarcerated or been on a Kolbe retreat from the inside. I sent some email requests to some guys to come, but I don't know if they made it or not.
Well, if you're there, it'd be great to speak up because we only have time for maybe one more
Yeah.
comment.
So anyways, I don't know. I know most of these guys are working, thank God. So anyway, but that's the beauty of it. There's a lot of these men that actually have come back now, and they're members of our core teams. And some of this that actually they were first exposed and baptized and confirmed in the prisons. And so it's a beautiful thing.
Okay, well, Gerald, thank you.
Can I make this?
Oh, yeah,
Can I
go-
make one more comment?
Sure. go ahead.
Just, yeah, what I think would be super helpful for me and maybe for others where this doesn't exist yet is just something that we could access that would help us, like, assume we know nothing from nothing to, this great program that's now, because you guys have already figured out a lot of the territory that I've been trying to figure out the last 2.5 years of being here. And we just had our first patient baptized this past summer. And that was the first in our inpatient locked psychiatric hospital in almost 50 years. So there's a lot that has already been done that would be great to know how to integrate. So that's my last comment. So thank you.
Thank you. If you look on the chat box, we have the links to Kolbe Ministries. And also I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, go to catholicprisonministries.org. That's the CPMC website. And there's a wealth of information there that you can also hopefully use in your ministry. But I want to, in addition to thanking you, Gerald, for this wonderful presentation, I want to invite everybody to our webinar next week. The CPMC monthly webinar is going to be titled Addressing Racism, A Time for Gospel Change. That's next Wednesday, the 13th of January at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, 10 a.m. California time. That's going to be presented by Dr. Chris Pranick from Regis University. And in order to really fully benefit from this upcoming webinar, I'd invite you to look at the chat feature now. I've just put in the link to some preparatory materials. So please go to our website, catholicprisonministries.org, and register for this webinar. And when you do that, you'll get this link also sent to you because as a video, there's some things you would want to read and look at before we do the webinar. You don't have to, but it would certainly, I think it would certainly help in terms of preparation for everybody involved. So again, the webinar registration link is listed at the bottom of our of the chat feature from Jared, and I also put in the link directly for the preparatory materials. And lastly, our next NACC, National Association of Catholic Chaplains Town Hall meeting is going to be on the 21st of January. And that will be presented by Joe Cotton. And the topic is Underground Ministries. And that's one-on-one prison ministry where you you link a parish to a prisoner. And he'll talk about that and share his insights with that on this. So again, thank you all so much for being with us. God bless you. And let's continue to pray for our country in these difficult days. God bless you. And thank you, Gerald.
You bet. Thank you. God bless you all.